Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
Okay, so in this aspect, we'll be looking at the poem Vanity by Diop. As I have said earlier, that this African poems examine the African experience. Now, in this poem, I will just look at the background briefly. With the colonization of Africa and subsequent introduction of Western values, many Africans, especially those educated in the Western way, consciously distance themselves from traditional beliefs. Now, Vanity is a poem of lamentation in which the poet persona is crying, wailing because Africans have left and forgotten their roots. Now, let's just read some lines from this poem. It starts by saying, if we tell gently, gently, all that we shall one day have to tell, who then will hear our voices without laughter? Sad complaining voices of beggars, who indeed will hear them without laughter? If we cry roughly of our torment, ever increasing from the start of things, what eyes will watch our large mouths, shaped by the laughter of big children? What eyes will watch our large mouths? Now, let me step back from this poem a little. You notice that the poem makes use of repetitions and rhetorical questions. The poet is lamenting. The setting of this poem is Africa, although it could be narrowed down to French West Africa, Senegal. The temporal setting clearly is the colonial era or the pre-independence period. It was a period when most of the new African educated elite were eager to become French citizens and enjoy the perceived privileges that went with it. So in other words, Africans left their roots and solidly embraced European culture, forgetting their roots. Now, this poem, the subject matter, it addresses the need for Africans not to forget where they came from. Obviously, the poet persona is concerned about the abandonment of ancestral ways. Now, if you really look at it, there are so many vices that thrive among us today because we have been so influenced by westernization. For example, recently the issue of gay marriage that is becoming predominant in our society. So, like I said, looking at the concept of homosexuality, now this is a foreign concept. It is a component of culture that is not common among Africans, but gradually, in fact rapidly, it is now becoming rampant. And then another foreign component is this issue of Britain. It is gradually fading out. You know, like the poet says, Africans are gradually forsaking their roots. You know, it is not uncommon for the youth to walk past an elderly person and not greet. Now, these are components of westernization that have crept into our culture. There are other examples of such imports. Now, we'll do a line by line or stanza by stanza analysis of this poem. In line 1 to 5, the poet comments on the reluctance of Africans to address certain issues, serious problems. According to him, this issue, which is yet to disclose, is being talked about in hushed tones. We find out that Africa is thriving in a land whereby we are plagued with so many situations, yet we do not want to rise up to the task to deal with these evils. In stanza 2, line 6 to 10, the stanza carries the poet's wonder further. Now, it's almost as if the poet is involved in a dialogue. He is speaking to himself and at the same time addressing some political situations. The poet wonders who will pay us attention if we complain about our pains, which have been there for ages. While analyzing one of the poems, I said that because Africa has been plagued with so many problems, you know, at some point we tend to be retrogressive because we do not want to address this problem. Stanza 3, lines 11 to 14. In a style of repeating what we have in the first and second stanza, the poet rhetorically asks again and again whether anyone will pay attention to our complaints and anger. Now, the masses are portrayed as beggars who are helpless, who are hopeless. And this kind of anger, this pain, is growing like a tumor, which is self-inflicted and is a self-nurtured pain. Now, in the second to the last stanza, lines 15 to 24, this is the longest in the poem. It provides details of why the poet wonders. We are informed that when our ancestors came, the way they normally do as spirits, they give us advice and they direct us. But these days, because of so much knowledge that has crept in, we have forgotten our traditional ways. Now, these days, everyone consults the internet for every solution, and actually, this is not how it works during the traditional time. In the final stanza, lines 25 to 30, this stanza recaps all that has been said in the previous stanza. We do not deserve being given attention if we now cry or complain because we have refused to listen to the voices of wisdom, that is, the voices of elders. Now, what are the things? The first thing, or the first issue we look at here is the abandonment of traditional ways and values, which we have emphasized while explaining the stanzas. Now, these days, many people will tend to see the African culture as barbaric and primitive, and now we have exposed ourselves to more complex ways, and these cultural conflicts are now giving us problems. Secondly, we cannot overlook the fact that the wisdom of ancestors, they are invaluable. The poet presents ancestors as a reservoir of knowledge, sound teaching, and wisdom. They are sufficient to guide their offspring from generation to generation. Now, the third issue, the third thing that the poet examines here is pain and misery. Now, you will take note that the poet makes use of some rhetorical questions. He is wondering, he is lamenting. He makes use of words that typify or explain this pain. Tumor, pitiful anger, plenty fruits, torment, complaining. Now, we will move over to the poetic devices. Now, of course, a poetic device in a poem, we are making references to the figures of speech being used. They are like the vital ingredients that make the language of the poem more elevated and elaborate. Of course, first off, the poet makes use of metaphors, which I referred to earlier. Pitiful anger, plenty fruits. The poet makes use of repetition, which is the most dominant feature. He says, if we tell gently, gently, line 1. If we weep gently, gently, line 27. What eyes watch our large mouth, line 8 and 10, and so on. The poet's tone is sarcastic, which engenders humor in the second stanza of the poem. However, the rhetorical questions which suffuse the poem, the poet speaks to his imaginary colleagues as if warning them to be mindful of the consequences of their action. Now, we also look at the fact that the poet makes use of rhetorical questions. He says, what heart will listen to our clamoring? Now, the rhetorical question, don't forget, it's a figure of speech that asks the question that does not necessarily need an answer at that moment. The question is meant for effect, for the reader or for the audience to ponder, to think about the point that is being made. He says, which grows in us like a tumor, in the black depth of our plenty fruits, what ear to our pitiful anger? The poet makes use of synecdoche. Synecdoche is a figure of speech that makes use of a part to represent a whole or a whole to represent a part. Now, take note of the use of references to some parts of the body: ears, throats, eyes, hearts. Now, these parts, of course, they are definitely referring to the human experience. Now, a sample question says here, it says, examine the quite effective use of repetition, which has been explained. And Vanity is a serious poem, themes with humor discussed. Now, take note that these questions will pop up or be displayed on your screen to actually determine how much you have learned in this class. Thank you.